Hello, my friends. Welcome back to the channel. I'm really happy you're here today because this video is not just about habits, and it's not just about English. It's about real life. It's about those quiet moments when you feel tired, stuck, and unsure why things are not moving forward, even though you are trying. This story is for anyone who feels lost, anyone who wants change but doesn't know where to start. Listen carefully, because sometimes the smallest details are the ones that change everything. There was a time when my life felt heavy, confusing, and slow. Every day looked the same. I woke up tired, even after sleeping for many hours. I went through my routine without energy, without excitement, and without a clear reason to keep pushing forward. From the outside, nothing looked wrong, but inside, something was missing. I used to think that big success comes from big changes. I believed that one day, something magical would happen and fix everything. I waited for motivation. I waited for confidence. I waited for the perfect moment. That moment never came. One evening, after another long and unproductive day, I sat alone and asked myself a simple question. Why does my life feel stuck? The answer was uncomfortable, but honest. My days were controlled by bad habits, small habits, quiet habits, habits I didn't even notice anymore. I was not failing because I was weak. I was failing because I was careless with my daily actions. I woke up late. I checked my phone first thing in the morning. I avoided hard tasks. I delayed important work. I complained instead of improving. None of these habits were dramatic, but together, they slowly drained my life. That night, I made a decision. Not a big decision, not a loud promise, just a quiet choice. I decided to change one small habit, just one. The next morning, I woke up 30 minutes earlier. That was it. No big plan, no pressure. I didn't change my whole life. I just gave myself a little more time. That extra time felt strange at first. The world was quiet. My mind was calm. For the first time in a long while, I was not rushing. That small habit changed something inside me. I felt a tiny sense of control, a small win, and that win mattered more than motivation. It showed me something important. Change does not start with inspiration. It starts with action. As days passed, I added another simple habit, then another. Nothing extreme, nothing impossible, just small, repeatable actions. Slowly, my energy returned. My focus improved. My confidence grew without me forcing it. I realized something powerful. The life we live is built by what we do daily, not by what we dream about. Habits are quiet. They don't ask for attention, but they shape everything. This is not a story about becoming perfect. It is a story about becoming aware. When you understand how habits control your life, you stop blaming the world. You stop waiting. You start building. And that is where real change begins. After that realization, I started paying attention to things I had ignored for years. I noticed how often I told myself excuses. I noticed how quickly I gave up when something felt uncomfortable. I noticed how much time I spent reacting instead of choosing. None of this was new, but seeing it clearly felt different. It was like turning on a light in a dark room and finally understanding why I kept hitting the same walls. One habit stood out more than the others. I avoided discomfort. Whenever something felt hard, boring, or slow, I escaped. I checked my phone. I watched random videos. I told myself I would do it later. Later became tomorrow. Tomorrow became next week. And next week quietly disappeared. This habit was stealing my time, my confidence, and my future, little by little. So I decided to face discomfort in a simple way. Not all at once. Just for 10 minutes a day. 10 minutes of doing the thing I wanted to avoid. Sometimes it was studying. Sometimes it was practicing English. Sometimes it was planning my day. Those 10 minutes felt longer than an hour at first. My mind fought back. It searched for excuses, but I stayed. Something interesting happened. After a few days, the discomfort became weaker. It didn't disappear, but it stopped controlling me. I learned an important lesson. Discomfort is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that growth is close. As I continued, another habit slowly changed. I stopped complaining as much. I realized that complaining gave me a false feeling of relief, but it solved nothing. Every complaint was energy wasted. Instead, I asked better questions. What can I improve today? What is one thing I can do better than yesterday? These questions didn't make life perfect, but they made it clearer. I also changed how I spoke to myself. Before, my inner voice was harsh and impatient. If I failed, I attacked myself. If I made a mistake, I felt ashamed. I thought being strict would push me forward. It did the opposite. It made me tired, so I practiced a new habit. I spoke to myself like a teacher, not a judge. Honest, but calm. Direct, but supportive. Slowly, my days stopped feeling heavy. Not because life became easy, but because I became stronger. My routine started working for me instead of against me. I didn't need motivation every morning. My habits carried me forward even on low energy days. That's when I understood something deeply. Habits are not about discipline alone. They are about identity. Every small action is a vote for the person you are becoming. And when those votes repeat daily, change becomes inevitable. I was no longer waiting for my life to change. I was building it, quietly, one habit at a time. As the weeks passed, I began to notice changes that were easy to miss if I wasn't paying attention. My mornings felt calmer. I didn't jump out of bed with panic anymore. I moved slower, but with purpose. I knew what I needed to do, and more importantly, I knew why I was doing it. That sense of direction was new to me, and it felt quietly powerful. One habit that surprised me the most was how I started using my time. Before, hours disappeared without me knowing where they went. Now, I treated time with a little more respect. I didn't try to control every minute, but I stopped wasting entire days. I learned that time doesn't need strict rules. It needs awareness. When you know how valuable it is, you naturally protect it. During this period, learning English became part of my daily routine. Not in a stressful way, not in long, exhausting sessions, just small, consistent practice. I listened more than I spoke at first. I paid attention to simple sentences. I repeated words quietly. I made mistakes and didn't panic. I reminded myself that fluency is built slowly, not magically. There were days when progress felt invisible, days when I felt stuck again. But this time didn't quit. I remembered something important. Growth is not always loud. Sometimes it happens silently, under the surface, before it shows itself. Just like a seed growing underground, doing work long before anyone sees the plant. Another habit changed without me planning it. I started finishing things, small things, tasks I used to abandon halfway. This created trust with myself. Every time I finished something, even something simple, I told my brain a new story. I am someone who follows through. That belief changed how I showed up in other areas of my life. I also became more careful about what I allowed into my mind. The content I watched, the people I listened to, the thoughts I repeated. I realized that motivation is not found. It is created by environment. When your environment supports growth, discipline becomes easier. Slowly, my confidence stopped being fragile. It wasn't based on mood anymore. It was based on proof. Proof that I could show up even when I didn't feel ready. Proof that small habits could carry me forward when motivation was absent. One evening, I looked back at my old self and felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not shame. Not regret. Gratitude. That version of me survived confusion. He waited long enough for change. And when the time came, he chose action instead of excuses. That's when I understood the real power of habits. They don't just change your schedule, they change how you see yourself. And when your identity changes, your life has no choice but to follow. The journey wasn't finished. It never is. But I was no longer lost. I was moving, and that made all the difference. There came a point when I realized something even deeper. My habits were no longer just actions I forced myself to do. They were slowly becoming part of who I was. I didn't wake up early because I was trying to improve anymore. I woke up early because that was simply how my day started. It felt natural, comfortable, quietly strong. I began to understand that discipline is misunderstood by many people. It is not punishment. It is not pressure. True discipline is self-respect. It is choosing not to betray yourself. Every time I kept a small promise to myself, I strengthened that respect. And every time I broke one, I felt it immediately. Not as guilt, but as distance from the person I wanted to become. Learning English followed the same pattern. At first, I struggled. Words felt stuck in my mouth. My sentences were slow and imperfect. I compared myself to others and felt small. But then I stopped comparing. I focused on consistency instead of speed. I practiced speaking even when my pronunciation was not perfect. I learned that clarity is more important than perfection. One habit that helped me deeply was speaking out loud when I was alone. Simple thoughts, simple sentences. I talked about my day. I explained ideas to an empty room. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt normal. And later, it felt empowering. My mouth learned to move before my fear could stop it. Another important shift happened in my mindset. I stopped seeing mistakes as proof of failure. I started seeing them as proof of effort. Every mistake meant I was trying, and trying meant I was moving forward. This change alone removed a heavy weight from my mind. I also learned to slow down when life felt overwhelming. Instead of quitting, I paused. I took a breath. I returned to my smallest habit. When everything feels too big, the smallest habit becomes your anchor. It keeps you grounded. It reminds you that progress is still possible. There were still difficult days. Days when energy was low. Days when doubts returned. But now, those days didn't control me. I had built systems stronger than my emotions. Habits carried me when motivation disappeared. And motivation always disappears at some point. One morning, while practicing English, I noticed something unexpected. I was thinking in English, not perfectly, not fluently, but naturally. That moment didn't feel loud or dramatic. It felt calm, and that calm told me I was on the right path. I realized that confidence grows quietly. It grows when no one is watching. It grows when you show up for yourself again and again. Not in big moments, but in ordinary ones. This journey taught me a truth I will never forget. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. And when your habits are aligned with who you want to become, progress becomes inevitable. I was no longer chasing a better life. I was building it, one simple habit at a time. As time went on, I started to notice how my reactions to life were changing. Problems did not disappear, but my response to them became calmer. Before, one small problem could ruin my entire day. Now, I paused. I thought. I chose my response instead of reacting automatically. This was new, and it felt like real growth. I realized that habits do more than organize your day. They train your mind. When you repeat small positive actions, your mind learns stability. It stops panicking. It stops rushing. It begins to trust the process. That trust gave me peace I had never felt before. One of the most important lessons came from failure. Even with all my new habits, I still failed sometimes. I missed days. I felt lazy. I doubted myself. But this time, failure didn't push me backward. It showed me where I needed adjustment. Instead of quitting, I asked what went wrong and how I could improve tomorrow. Failure became information, not a judgment. I also learned to protect my focus. I became more aware of distractions, notifications, noise, unnecessary conversations. I didn't remove everything, but I reduced what drained me. Focus is fragile. When you protect it, progress becomes easier. When you ignore it, even simple tasks feel heavy. My English practice improved because of this focus. I stopped jumping between methods. I chose simple materials and stayed with them. Short stories, clear sentences, repetition. I listened carefully. I spoke slowly. I allowed myself to sound imperfect. With time, words started coming faster. Sentences felt more natural. Confidence followed quietly. Another change happened in how I viewed time. I stopped thinking in terms of hours and started thinking in terms of actions. Even 10 minutes mattered if used well. This removed pressure. It made progress feel possible every day, even on busy or difficult days. I noticed something else too. When my habits improved, my self-respect improved. I trusted myself more. I believed my own promises. That belief affected everything. How I spoke, how I walked, how I planned my future. Confidence was no longer something I waited for. It was something I built. People around me began to notice changes. They asked questions. They said I seemed calmer, more focused. But the biggest change was invisible. I felt aligned with myself. My actions matched my values. That alignment created inner strength. I understood then that motivation is unreliable, but habits are honest. They show up every day. They don't need excitement. They just need commitment. And commitment grows when you see results, even small ones. Life didn't suddenly become easy, but it became clear, and clarity is powerful. When you know what to do today, tomorrow becomes less frightening. The future stops feeling overwhelming. This journey taught me that lasting change is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It builds slowly through repetition, patience, and self-respect. And once it takes root, it changes everything from the inside out. There was a moment when I understood that real change is tested during hard times, not easy ones. Anyone can keep good habits when life feels light. The real challenge appears when things go wrong, when plans fail, when energy is low, when doubts return without warning. That test came for me sooner than I expected. One week, everything felt heavy again. My routine broke. I missed practice. I woke up late. Old habits tried to return quietly, like they were waiting for a weak moment. I felt disappointed in myself, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe nothing had really changed. But something was different this time. Instead of giving up, I noticed what was happening. I didn't attack myself. I didn't panic. I simply paused and reminded myself of how far I had come. I returned to the smallest habit I knew I could do. Just one simple action. That was enough to stop the fall. That experience taught me an important lesson. Progress is not a straight line. It moves forward, then sideways, sometimes backward. What matters is not never falling. What matters is learning how to stand up faster each time. I also realized that habits need flexibility. Rigidity breaks easily. Flexibility survives. When I was too strict, I felt pressure. When I allowed adjustment, I stayed consistent. Some days needed less effort. Some days needed rest. Understanding this made my routine sustainable. My English practice benefited from this mindset. On difficult days, I didn't force long sessions. I listened instead. I repeated one short paragraph. I spoke a few sentences aloud. That was enough to keep the connection alive. Consistency mattered more than intensity. Another important shift happened in how I measured success. I stopped measuring progress by results and started measuring it by effort. Did I show up today? Did I try? Did I take one small step? If the answer was yes, the day was successful. This removed pressure from my life. Pressure had been my enemy for years. It made me rush. It made me quit. Now, patience replaced pressure, and patience gave me strength. I also learned the value of silence. Quiet moments became powerful. Morning, silence. Evening, reflection. These moments helped me reset. They helped me listen to myself. In that silence, clarity grew. I began to trust the process fully, not because everything was perfect, but because I had proof. Proof that habits work. Proof that small actions change identity. Proof that progress continues even when it feels invisible. Confidence stopped being something I chased. It became something that followed me, quietly, naturally, without effort. I no longer needed external validation. I knew who I was becoming. That's when I understood something deeply meaningful. Growth is not loud. It does not rush. It waits for consistency. And when you give it time, it rewards you with strength that cannot be shaken. I was no longer afraid of hard days. I was prepared for them. And that readiness changed everything. With time, I started to see my life from a wider perspective. I was no longer focused only on fixing problems. I was learning how to build a life that could handle problems. This shift was subtle, but it changed how I approached every day. One thing became very clear. Consistency creates safety. When your days have structure, your mind relaxes. It stops constantly searching for certainty. My habits gave my mind something to hold on to. Even when emotions changed, my actions stayed steady. I began to understand the importance of patience. Before, I wanted fast results. I wanted proof that my effort mattered. Now, I trusted delayed results. I understood that some changes need time to appear. Just because you cannot see progress today does not mean nothing is happening. This understanding helped me deeply with English learning. I stopped checking my level every week. I stopped worrying about sounding fluent. I focused on using the language. Daily listening, speaking, repeating. Over time, words began to come naturally, not because I forced them, but because they had become familiar. Another important lesson was learning to simplify. I removed unnecessary goals. I focused on what truly mattered. When your goals are clear, your energy stops spreading thin. Focus creates speed, even when you move slowly. I also learned how powerful routines can be for emotional balance. On stressful days, my routine calmed me. On good days, it grounded me. Habits became anchors. They kept me steady when life moved unpredictably. There were moments when I looked at my past and felt surprised. I didn't recognize the person I used to be. Not because he was bad, but because he was lost. That realization didn't bring shame. It brought compassion. I understood how easy it is to drift without direction. One powerful habit I developed was reflection. At the end of each day, I asked myself simple questions. What did I do well today? What can I improve tomorrow? These questions guided me forward without pressure. I noticed my communication improving, not just in English, but in life. I listened better. I spoke more clearly. I paused before responding. Confidence showed itself in calmness, not noise. Another realization came quietly. Discipline is freedom. When your habits are strong, you are no longer controlled by mood or circumstances. You gain choice, and choice is the foundation of confidence. I began to plan my future differently, not with fear, but with curiosity. I no longer asked if I could change. I knew I could. The only question left was how far I was willing to go. This journey taught me that strength is built daily, not discovered suddenly. And when you respect the process, life slowly starts respecting you back. I was no longer surviving my days. I was shaping them. As this new way of living continued, I began to notice how my thoughts were changing. Before, my mind was always loud. It jumped from worry to worry. It replayed past mistakes and imagined future failures. Now, my thoughts slowed down, not because problems disappeared, but because I had learned how to sit with them without panic. I understood that the mind becomes calm when it trusts your actions. When you show up for yourself every day, even in small ways, your mind relaxes. It stops shouting. It stops trying to protect you with fear. This was one of the most unexpected gifts of building habits. Another important change happened in how I handled setbacks. When something didn't go as planned, I didn't see it as proof that I was failing. I saw it as part of the process. Every path has obstacles. The difference now was that obstacles no longer stopped me. They slowed me down, but they didn't turn me around. My English practice reflected this mindset. Some days, words flowed easily. Other days, they felt stuck again. Instead of feeling frustrated, I accepted it. Language learning is not linear. It moves forward in waves. Understanding this saved me from quitting many times. I also learned the power of presence. I stopped rushing through moments. When I practiced English, I practiced fully. When I rested without guilt. Divided attention had drained me for years. Focus gave me energy back. Another lesson revealed itself slowly. Confidence is quiet. It does not announce itself. It does not need approval. It shows up as calm decisions and steady effort. I no longer needed to prove anything to anyone. I was building something real for myself. I became more selective with my goals. I chose depth over speed. Instead of doing many things poorly, focused on doing a few things well. This brought clarity and reduced stress. Progress felt cleaner and more meaningful. There were moments of doubt, of course. Doubt never disappears completely. But now, doubt didn't control my actions. I learned that courage is not the absence of doubt. It is moving forward despite it. I also noticed how gratitude began to grow naturally. I appreciated small improvements. A clearer sentence. A calmer morning, a focused hour. Gratitude made the journey lighter. It reminded me that progress was already happening. One evening, while reflecting on my day, I realized something important. I was no longer chasing change. I was living it, quietly, naturally, without pressure. This stage of the journey taught me that peace comes from alignment. When your thoughts, actions, and values move in the same direction, life feels lighter even when it is challenging. I was no longer afraid of the future. I was prepared to meet it, one steady step at a time. As the months passed, I began to understand that growth is not only about adding good habits. Sometimes, it is about letting go of expectations that were never mine, letting go of pressure I put on myself to move faster than I was ready for, letting go of the idea that progress must always look impressive. I realized how much energy I had wasted trying to prove something, prove that I was improving, prove that I was capable, prove that my effort mattered. When I stopped proving and started practicing, everything became lighter. Progress no longer needed an audience. It only needed consistency. This change affected how I learned English as well. I stopped worrying about sounding smart. I focused on being clear. I stopped memorizing complex sentences. I practiced simple ones deeply. I learned that clarity creates connection, and connection is more important than complexity. Another important lesson came from observing my patience. Before, impatience controlled many of my decisions. I wanted results now. If they didn't come, I felt discouraged. Now, I understood that impatience is often fear in disguise. Fear that effort will not be rewarded. Fear that time will be wasted. Trust replaced that fear. Trust in the process. Trust in repetition. Trust in time. When trust grows, impatience fades. I also noticed how my confidence began to show in small, quiet ways. I spoke more calmly. I listened without interrupting. I paused before reacting. Confidence was no longer loud or rushed. It was steady and grounded. One powerful realization came when I faced a challenge that would have defeated me before. It wasn't easy. It tested my discipline and focus. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I broke it into small steps, one action at a time. I completed it slowly, but I completed it. That moment changed how I saw myself. I was no longer someone who avoided difficulty. I was someone who approached it patiently. That identity shift mattered more than any result. My daily routines had become anchors. They didn't control my life. They supported it. When days were chaotic, routines brought me back to center. When days were calm, routines kept me grounded. I also learned the importance of rest. Real rest, not distraction, not escape. Rest that restores energy. Rest that prepares you for the next step. Balance became part of discipline, not its enemy. Looking back, I saw how far I had come. Not just in skills, but in mindset. I was more present, more aware, more patient, more resilient. This part of the journey taught me a quiet truth. When you stop chasing results and start respecting the process, progress follows naturally. I wasn't rushing anymore. I was moving forward, and that made all the difference. Over time, began to notice a deeper change in the way I approached challenges. Before, even small difficulties felt enormous. I would feel overwhelmed and often freeze, unsure of where to start. Now, I learned to break every challenge into smaller, manageable pieces. One step at a time became my motto. This simple shift turned what once seemed impossible into something achievable. I realized that consistency is more important than intensity. A single focused action, repeated daily, creates results far greater than bursts of effort followed by long pauses. This lesson applied to every part of life. Studying English, practicing habits, planning my day, everything improved when I committed to small, steady actions. My confidence continued to grow, not in loud or obvious ways, but quietly. I started trusting myself more, trusting my decisions, trusting that even on hard days, I would still show up, trusting that my effort, however small, was never wasted. This trust became a foundation I could rely on, more solid than any external validation. At the same time, I learned how to handle setbacks with grace. Mistakes and failures no longer felt like disasters. They became opportunities to adjust, learn, and try again. Every time I faced a setback, I asked myself what I could do differently next time, without judgment or self-criticism. This approach removed fear from my life, and in its place, I found curiosity. Learning English became part of this larger process. I stopped worrying about perfection. I stopped comparing myself to others. Instead, I focused on understanding and practicing. Reading short stories, speaking simple sentences, repeating words aloud. These small steps, taken every day, slowly built fluency. Progress became visible, not because I forced it, but because I stayed consistent. I also learned to protect my mental space. I became careful about the content I consumed, the people I spent time with, and even the thoughts I entertain. When your environment supports your goals, discipline becomes easier. When it distracts or discourages you, progress slows down. Awareness became a powerful tool in my growth. One of the most powerful lessons was patience. Change takes time. Any meaningful skill, habit, or personal improvement requires repeated effort. When I accepted that, I stopped rushing. I stopped measuring myself against others or against unrealistic timelines. Instead, I measured progress by my effort, by my consistency, and by how I responded to challenges. Another habit that changed everything was reflection. Each evening, I reviewed my day. I asked myself what I had done well, what I could improve, and what I would focus on tomorrow. Reflection created awareness. Awareness created control. Control created confidence. These small moments of clarity helped me grow in ways I had never imagined. I noticed how much my perspective on life had shifted. Problems that once felt overwhelming now seemed temporary. Difficult days no longer discouraged me. They became part of the journey, opportunities to apply the lessons I had learned. Life no longer controlled me. I was learning to steer it steadily. Through all of this, I understood a simple truth. Growth is silent. It is not flashy. It is not dramatic. It happens quietly, beneath the surface, through repeated actions, small victories, and consistent effort. And once it takes hold, it changes not only what you do, but who you are. I wasn't rushing anymore. I was moving forward, steadily, intentionally, and with purpose. And that made all the difference. From that point onward, my days became more intentional. I woke up with purpose, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Each morning, I reminded myself of one small step I could take toward improvement. It didn't matter how small it was. The act of showing up became more important than the result. Even on days when energy was low, the simple act of moving forward made all the difference. I continued to refine my habits. I realized that habits are not just actions, they are expressions of identity. Every choice, every repeated action, reflected who I wanted to be. When I consistently made decisions that aligned with my values, I felt stronger. I felt capable. I felt alive. That quiet, steady growth gave me more confidence than any sudden success could. Challenges still appeared, as they always do. Life doesn't stop testing you. There were days when doubt crept in, days when I wanted to quit, when old habits whispered that effort was pointless. But I had learned a crucial lesson. Persistence matters more than perfection. Even a small effort, repeated daily, builds strength. Even a tiny step forward creates momentum, and momentum, over time, becomes unstoppable. I also discovered the importance of focus. My mind had often been scattered, jumping from worry to worry, comparing myself to others, chasing every distraction. Now, I limited what I allowed in. I focused on the essentials. I gave my attention to meaningful work. I gave my energy to consistent growth. And slowly, everything that once felt chaotic became manageable. Clarity replaced confusion. English became more than a skill. It became a measure of patience and persistence. I practiced daily, even in small ways. I spoke out loud, repeated phrases, read stories, and listened carefully. Each day, words became easier, sentences smoother, thoughts clearer. Improvement was quiet, gradual, but undeniable. I realized that learning is not about rushing. It is about showing up, consistently, with curiosity and openness. Another habit that transformed my life was reflection. Every evening, I asked myself what went well, what I could improve, and how I could approach tomorrow better. This simple practice allowed me to understand myself deeply. It taught me to notice small victories, to recognize growth, and to treat mistakes as lessons, not failures. Self-awareness became my secret weapon. Over time, I saw that confidence doesn't come from luck or sudden inspiration. It comes from trust in your actions, trust in your habits, trust in yourself. The more I acted consistently, the more I believed in myself. The more I believed, the more naturally confidence appeared in my words, my decisions, and my presence. I also realized the power of patience and time. Nothing worthwhile happens instantly. Mastery, strength, knowledge they all take time. Accepting this truth removed pressure and fear. I no longer chased immediate results. I focused on persistent effort, understanding that the outcomes would follow in their own time. And they did, slowly, quietly, steadily. By now, I had changed in ways I hadn't imagined. My mornings were calm, my mind was steady, my actions aligned with my values, and my efforts built a life I could trust. Life no longer controlled me. I controlled my habits, and through them, I guided my life. Even setbacks became lessons instead of obstacles. Mistakes no longer defined me. They instructed me. They revealed where attention was needed, where patience could be improved, where focus had slipped. Every challenge became an opportunity to practice the habits I had built. Every obstacle became a quiet test of resilience. And slowly, steadily, I became a person I respected. I stopped waiting for motivation or external validation. I stopped comparing myself to others. I focused on my journey, my growth, and my actions. Each day became a step forward, even if the progress was invisible. Each small action contributed to the person I was becoming. In the end, I understood something simple yet profound. Life is not about sudden transformations. Life is about small, consistent choices, repeated over time. Life is about showing up, even when you don't feel ready. Life is about building habits that shape who you are. And when you commit to that process, change becomes inevitable. So now, as I look back, I feel gratitude. Gratitude for the struggles, for the patience required, for the small steps that added up. Gratitude for the quiet growth that shaped my character. And I understand that the journey never truly ends. There will always be challenges, doubts, and opportunities for growth. But now, I am ready. Now, I know how to move forward, steadily, confidently, and intentionally. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, change doesn't happen overnight, but every small step matters. Keep going, trust the process, and never underestimate the power of daily habits. Your future self will thank you. Goodbye, and take care until next time.